Ryan's knees ached as he scrubbed the crystalline floors of the Velmora estate. The alien glass reflected everything in strange, warped angles, making his own face look like a stranger's. He'd been cleaning these same floors since he was old enough to hold a brush, and after 20 years, he knew every crack and imperfection by heart. "Move faster, human," one of the Velmorian children called from the balcony above. Her voice had that musical quality all Velmorians possessed, but the words still stung. "We have guests arriving soon, and Mother says everything must be perfect." Ryan nodded without looking up. Talking back never helped. The Velmorians weren't cruel by their standards, they simply saw him as lesser. He was human, after all. A primitive species that had barely mastered space travel before stumbling into a galaxy full of older, wiser civilizations. He moved his scrubbing cloth in steady circles, watching the suds catch the light. Sometimes, in quiet moments like these, Ryan wondered about his real parents. The Velmorians told him the story every year on his birthday, as if reminding him of his place. They'd found him as an infant in a derelict ship floating near the Saar Prime. No identification, no records, just a crying baby in a pod designed for one. Lord Velma had taken him in out of charity, or so he claimed. Ryan suspected it was more about having cheap labor that couldn't complain. The estate bustled with activity as evening approached. Servants from a dozen different species rushed through the corridors, carrying platters of exotic foods and arranging furniture. Tonight was special. Lord Velma was hosting a gathering of sector nobles, and he'd promised to unveil something extraordinary. Ryan caught glimpses of the guests as they arrived. Tall, elegant beings with skin like polished metal. Creatures that floated rather than walked. All of them moved with confidence, with purpose. They belonged here. Ryan just worked here. "You there, human boy," a voice called. Ryan turned to see Lady Velmora descending the main staircase. Her silver robes flowed around her like water, and her eyes held that distant look she always had when addressing him. "Go to the vault and retrieve the display case. Be careful. If you damage it, you'll be sleeping outside for a month." Ryan bowed slightly. "Yes, Lady Velmora." The vault sat deep beneath the estate, accessible only through a series of locked corridors. Ryan had been down there a handful of times, always supervised, always reminded not to touch anything valuable. The Velmorians collected artifacts from across the galaxy, pieces of ancient history that they showed off to impress their peers. Tonight's centerpiece was something they'd acquired recently. Ryan had overheard Lord Velma bragging about it to his associates. An artifact from the predecessor civilization, the mysterious race that had built the first great empire in the galaxy before vanishing without a trace. Nobody knew what happened to them. Some said they ascended to a higher plane of existence. Others believed they destroyed themselves in a war. Either way, they left behind ruins and relics that still baffled modern science. Ryan carefully lifted the display case. Inside sat a perfect black sphere about the size of his head. Symbols covered its surface, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves like they were alive. Even through the protective glass, Ryan felt drawn to it. The sphere seemed to hum with energy, though he couldn't actually hear anything. He carried it upstairs, where servants had arranged a pedestal in the main hall. Guests had already gathered, their conversations creating a buzz of excitement. Ryan placed the case down gently and stepped back, trying to make himself invisible as he always did during gatherings. Lord Velma raised his hands for silence. "Distinguished guests, I present the Cipher of Eons. An authentic predecessor artifact, one of only 7 known to exist. Scholars believe it's some kind of data storage device, though none have managed to activate it." The crowd pressed closer, murmuring appreciation. Lady Velmora stood beside her husband, practically glowing with pride. "Ryan," Lord Velma called, not even looking at him. "Remove the case and polish the surface. Let our guests see it properly." Ryan's stomach tightened. "My lord, are you certain? If it's that valuable. Did I ask for your opinion?" Lord Velma's tone went cold. "Do as you're told." Ryan approached the pedestal, aware of dozens of eyes watching him. Carefully, he lifted the protective case away. The sphere sat exposed now, its symbols moving faster. He pulled a soft cloth from his pocket and reached out. The instant his fingers made contact, the world exploded in light. The sphere lifted into the air, breaking free from its pedestal mount. Brilliant blue energy poured from it, filling the hall with illumination so bright that guests shielded their eyes. Ryan tried to pull his hand back, but couldn't. The symbols on the sphere's surface were flowing up his arm now, burning themselves into his skin without pain. Then a voice spoke. It wasn't in his ears but inside his mind, resonating through his chest and bones. Ancient, powerful, and absolutely certain. Genetic markers confirmed. Welcome, King. The light faded. Ryan stood frozen, his arm covered in glowing symbols that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. The sphere orbited slowly around his head, as if guarding him. Lady Velmora had fallen backward, her silver eyes wide with shock. Lord Velma's face had gone pale, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Every guest in the hall stared at Ryan like he transformed into something else entirely. What did it say? Someone whispered. It called him king, another voice answered. Ryan looked down at his marked arms, then at the faces surrounding him. Fear, confusion, and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. For the first time in his life, Ryan saw the Velmorians looking at him not as a servant, but as a threat. The hall descended into chaos. Nobles shouted over each other, some backing away from Ryan while others pushed forward to get a better look. The cipher continued its slow orbit around his head, pulsing with that same blue light. Ryan felt something stirring inside him, like a door in his mind had been unlocked and memories that weren't his own were trying to push through. Lord Velma recovered first. He snapped his fingers, and 4 security guards surrounded Ryan, their weapons drawn but not yet aimed. Nobody leaves this room, he commanded. Seal the doors. This stays private until we understand what's happening. Understand. Lady Velmora stood, smoothing her robes with trembling hands. That artifact just recognized a human servant as royalty. There's nothing to understand except that it's malfunctioning. Predecessor technology doesn't malfunction, an elderly guest said. Ryan recognized him as a scholar from the core worlds, someone Lord Velma had invited specifically to authenticate the cipher. If it activated, there's a reason. Ryan tried to touch the symbols on his arm, but they were part of his skin now, glowing faintly beneath the surface. I don't understand any of this. I'm nobody. You know that better than anyone. Clearly, we don't know anything, Lord Velma said coldly. He turned to the scholar. Thomas, you've studied the predecessors for decades. Explain this. The old man approached Ryan cautiously, his gray skin darker than most of his species. His eyes held something Ryan had never seen directed at him before, something like wonder. May I examine the markings? He asked Ryan directly, not Lord Velma. Ryan nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Thomas pulled a scanning device from his robes and passed it over Ryan's arm. The device beeped rapidly, displaying data that made the scholar's eyes widen. Impossible, Thomas whispered. Then louder, this is impossible. What is? Several voices demanded at once. Thomas looked around the room, his expression grave. The genetic markers. They're human, yes, but not like any human genome in current records. These patterns match fragments we found in predecessor ruins. The mathematical sequences, the complexity, it's all identical. You're saying humans are the predecessors? Lady Velmora laughed, but it sounded forced. Humans barely have faster-than-light travel. They live on a handful of backwater colonies. The predecessors built an empire spanning thousands of worlds. I'm saying, Thomas continued carefully, that humans might be what's left of the predecessors. There's been a theory for years, dismissed by most academics because it seemed too fantastic. The timeline matches. The predecessors vanished approximately 50,000 years ago in an event we call the Sundering. Human archaeological records show a catastrophic population collapse around the same period. What if they didn't vanish? What if they were reduced, scattered, their knowledge lost? The room fell silent. Ryan's mind reeled. He'd spent his whole life being told humans were newcomers to the galactic stage, lucky to have survived long enough to develop space travel. Now this scholar was suggesting his species had once ruled the stars? That's a nice story, Lord Velma said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. But it doesn't explain why this artifact responds to a random orphan. Not random, Thomas said. He pointed at the cipher still orbiting Ryan. These artifacts were genetic locks, designed to respond only to specific bloodlines. If this one activated for him, it means Ryan carries the DNA of predecessor royalty. He's likely a direct descendant of their ruling class. Ryan found his voice. My parents abandoned me in a ship. That doesn't sound very royal. Or they were hiding you, Thomas said softly. If someone knew about human heritage, knew that a purge was coming or that enemies were hunting the bloodline, putting an infant in stasis and setting the ship adrift would be the safest option. Anonymous. Untraceable. Lady Velmora stepped forward, her earlier shock replaced by calculation. This changes nothing. So the artifact activated. That doesn't give him any actual power or authority. He's still just one human. But he won't be once word gets out, another noble interjected. If humans learn their species once ruled the galaxy, if they discover this boy carries royal blood, it could spark a movement. An uprising. Then word doesn't get out, Lord Velma said flatly. He looked at the guards. Take him to a holding cell. Quietly. We'll contact the council and let them decide what to do with him. The guards moved toward Ryan, but the cipher flared brightly. Energy rippled outward, and the guards stumbled backward as if they'd hit an invisible wall. The artifact's voice spoke again, this time audible to everyone in the room. Protection protocols activated. The air must not be harmed. Lord Velma's face flushed with rage. Override it. Shut it down. Do something. Thomas shook his head. You can't override predecessor technology, my lord. It's beyond our understanding. If it's chosen to protect him, nothing we have will penetrate its defenses. Then we wait it out, Lady Velmora said. How long can that thing maintain a shield? Eventually it'll run out of power. Predecessor artifacts don't run on conventional power, Thomas said. Some have been active for 50,000 years without dimming. This could last indefinitely. Ryan's mind raced. He was trapped in a room full of people who now saw him as either a threat or a tool. The cipher protected him for now, but what happened when the council arrived? They had weapons far more powerful than anything in this estate. He'd heard stories about the council, the coalition of species that govern most of the known galaxy. They didn't tolerate challenges to their authority. We need to move, a voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. A woman stood there, human like Ryan, dressed in worn flight gear with a plasma pistol holstered at her hip. She had dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes that had seen too much. Behind her, two more humans carried heavy rifles. Who are you? Lord Velma demanded. How did you get past security? Your security is taking a nap, the woman said. She looked at Ryan. You're coming with us. Right now. I don't even know you, Ryan said. My name's Nicole. I'm with the Remnant. We've been watching for signs of sci-fi activation for 20 years. When this one lit up, every sensor we have screamed. She gestured urgently. We can explain everything later, but council ships just entered the system. They'll be here in minutes, and trust me, you don't want to be their prisoner. You can't just take him, Lady Velmora protested. Nicole raised her pistol slightly, not quite aiming but making her point clear. Actually, I can. Ryan, choose now. Come with us and maybe survive, or stay here and definitely become a lab specimen. Your call. Ryan looked at Thomas. The old scholar gave him a small nod. Go, he whispered. Learn the truth. I'll find you when I can. Ryan took a step toward Nicole. Then another. The cipher followed, maintaining its protective orbit. None of the guards moved to stop him, not with that shield active and armed humans in the doorway. As Ryan crossed the threshold, alarms began blaring throughout the estate. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridors. That'll be the council, Nicole said, already running. Hope you're good at sprinting. Ryan ran after her, leaving behind the only home he'd ever known. Behind him, he heard Lord Velma screaming orders, heard the sound of ships descending toward the estate. His old life was burning away with every step. But for the first time, Ryan felt like he was running toward something instead of away from it. Toward answers. Toward truth. Toward whatever destiny the cipher had just chosen for him. Nicole's ship was nothing like the elegant vessels Ryan had seen at the estate. It was a patchwork of mismatched hull plates and jury-rigged systems, the kind of craft that looked like it might fall apart if you sneezed too hard. But the moment Nicole hit the engines, Ryan understood why she'd chosen it. The ship moved like a predator, responsive and quick. Strap in, Nicole shouted over the roar of the thrusters. Council fighters just launched, and they're not going to ask nicely. Ryan fumbled with the crash harness as the ship lurched sideways. Through the viewport, he saw 3 sleek council interceptors closing fast, their weapons already charging. Nicole dove toward the planet's surface, skimming so close to the Velmora estate that Ryan could see people scattering on the grounds. Below. You're insane, Ryan said, gripping his seat as the ship rolled through a narrow gap between 2 towers. I'm experienced, Nicole corrected. Insane would be fighting them head-on. She pulled up hard, and Ryan's stomach dropped as they shot toward the upper atmosphere. Thomas, you reading me? A crackling voice came through the comm system. I'm here, Nicole. I managed to slip away during the confusion. Sending you coordinates to the remnant base now. Who's Thomas? Ryan asked. The scholar who scanned you, Nicole said, banking around a cluster of orbital platforms. He's been with us for years, pretending to be just another academic while actually preserving human history. Most of what we know about the predecessors, we learned from him. Weapons fire streaked past the viewport. Nicole cursed and threw the ship into a corkscrew pattern that made Ryan's vision blur. Hold on to your lunch. This is going to get rough. She wasn't kidding. For the next 10 minutes, Nicole performed maneuvers that should have torn the ship apart. She used debris fields for cover, dove through the rings of a nearby gas giant, and at one point actually flew backward while shooting at a pursuing fighter. Ryan had no idea humans could pilot like this. Where did you learn to fly? He gasped when they finally broke free of the pursuit. Out here in the dark, away from the civilized sectors, Nicole said. She set the autopilot and turned to face him. When you're human in this galaxy, you learn to be good at running and hiding, or you don't survive long enough to learn anything else. Ryan touched the symbols still glowing on his arms. They pulsed steadily, like a second heartbeat. Thomas said something about the remnant. What is that exactly? We're humans who refuse to forget, Nicole said. Most of our species bought into the story that we're newcomers, primitives who got lucky. But some of us found inconsistencies. Ruins that didn't match official histories. Artifacts with human genetic markers. Stories passed down through families about a time before the scattering. She gestured at the cipher floating near Ryan's shoulder. We've been searching for these things for generations. You're the first person we've seen one actually activate for. So what happens now? Now we get you somewhere safe and figure out what that thing wants to teach you. Nicole's expression softened slightly. You're going to start having dreams, Ryan. Visions. The cipher is a data repository, but it doesn't just dump information into your head. It unlocks genetic memory, shows you things your ancestors knew. It's going to be intense. Ryan wanted to ask more, but exhaustion suddenly crashed over him like a wave. His eyelids felt impossibly heavy. I'm so tired. That's normal, Nicole said. The bonding process takes energy. Sleep. We've got a few hours before we reach the hollowed reach. Ryan tried to fight it, but his body had other ideas. His eyes closed, and consciousness slipped away. The dreams came immediately. Ryan stood on a world he didn't recognize, under a sky with 3 suns. Around him stretched a city that made the greatest modern metropolises look like villages. Towers of crystal and light reached toward the heavens, connected by bridges that seemed to float on air. Ships moved between buildings in orderly patterns, thousands of them, more than Ryan had ever seen in one place. But it wasn't the city that captured his attention. It was the people. Humans, everywhere. Humans in elegant clothing that shifted colors. Humans working on holographic displays that responded to thought. Humans of every shade and appearance, moving with confidence and purpose through their world. This was humanity at its peak. This was what his species had been. The scene shifted. Ryan now stood in what looked like a command center. Dozens of humans monitored screens showing star systems and fleet positions. But there was tension in the air, fear poorly hidden behind professional faces. The breach is widening, a woman said. She wore a uniform decorated with symbols Ryan somehow understood meant high authority. We're losing the containment field. How long until it reaches inhabited space? A man asked. His uniform bore a crown symbol that made Ryan's chest tighten with recognition. 6 months. Maybe less. The crowned man, a king Ryan's genetic memory identified as Andrew, closed his eyes. Then we're out of time. Initiate the Sundering Protocol. My lord, that will destroy everything we've built. Our empire, our culture, our species will survive, Andrew interrupted. Scattered, diminished, but alive. If that thing reaches populated space, it won't just kill us. It'll consume every sentient mind in the galaxy. This is the only way. The vision shifted again, faster now. Ryan saw weapons being built, massive constructs that bent space itself. He saw evacuation ships launching, carrying humans and stasis to random coordinates across the galaxy. He saw the moment the weapons fired, tearing holes in reality that swallowed entire star systems. The human empire collapsed in days, its people scattered like seeds in a storm. And through it all, Ryan felt Andrew's certainty. This wasn't defeat. It was sacrifice. Humanity destroyed itself to save species that didn't even exist yet, races that would one day evolve on worlds the enemy would never reach because there were no humans left to lead it there. Ryan woke with tears on his face. Nicole was shaking his shoulder gently. Easy, she said. You were crying out in your sleep. What did you see? Ryan told her everything. As he spoke, Nicole's expression shifted from concern to awe. That's the missing piece, she whispered. We knew something catastrophic happened, but we never understood why. Your people didn't fall. They chose to break themselves. To save everyone else, Ryan said. The weight of it pressed on his chest. We gave up everything. And nobody remembered. Nicole's voice held anger now. The species humanity saved built their civilizations on our ruins and never even knew to say thank you. Thomas's voice crackled over the comm. Nicole, Ryan, I've finished analyzing the data from the Sci-Fi activation. There are more of them out there. At least 6 other artifacts, hidden on worlds throughout the hollowed reach. If Ryan can activate them all, we could restore massive amounts of lost knowledge. The Council won't let that happen, Nicole said. I know, Thomas replied. That's why we need to move fast. I'm sending coordinates to the nearest vault. It's on a dead world called Sanctum. The old records call it a training facility for the royal line. If anywhere can teach Ryan how to use his inheritance, it's there. Ryan looked out the viewport. Space stretched endlessly before them, full of secrets and dangers. The cipher pulsed against his skin, feeding him information he was only beginning to understand. How long to reach Sanctum? He asked. 3 days, Nicole said. If we're lucky and the Council doesn't find us first. They'll find us, Ryan said with certainty he couldn't explain. But maybe by then, I'll know enough to matter. Nicole studied his face, seeing something there that made her nod. Maybe you will. Get some rest while you can. The real work starts when we land. Ryan closed his eyes again, but this time sleep didn't come. Instead, the cipher whispered to him in that ancient voice, showing him fragments of techniques and knowledge that humanity had wielded like tools. He had so much to learn, and so little time. But for the first time in his life, Ryan felt like he belonged to something larger than himself. He was part of a legacy that had sacrificed everything for others. Now he just had to prove worthy of it. Sanctum looked dead from orbit. The planet's surface was scarred with massive craters, its oceans long evaporated, leaving behind dried salt flats that stretched for thousands of miles. Ryan pressed his face against the viewport, searching for any sign of the vault Thomas had described. Are you sure this is the right place? He asked. The coordinates match the old star charts perfectly, Thomas said. He'd joined them during a risky rendezvous at a mining outpost, bringing supplies and additional intel. The vault was built to survive anything, including whatever weapon created those craters. It'll be deep underground. Nicole guided the ship toward a mountain range on the planet's northern continent. As they descended, Ryan noticed something odd about one of the peaks. Its angles were too perfect, too geometric. It wasn't a mountain at all. It was a structure buried under 50,000 years of dust and rock. There, Thomas pointed. That's the entrance marker. The symbols matched the ones on Ryan's arms. They landed in a valley beside the ancient structure. The moment Ryan stepped off the ship, the cipher reacted. It spun faster around his head, pulling him toward a cliff face that looked like solid rock. But as Ryan approached, the symbols on his arms blazed bright, and the stone shimmered like water. A doorway appeared where none had existed before. Genetic lock, Thomas breathed. Only someone with the royal bloodline can open it. Ryan stepped through, and the others followed. Inside, emergency lighting flickered to life, powered by systems that had waited millennia for activation. The corridor stretched ahead, wide enough for 10 people to walk side by side. The walls were covered in murals showing human history, from primitive cave paintings to star-spanning civilizations. This is incredible, Nicole whispered. Her voice echoed in the vast space. This is actual human art, preserved perfectly. They walked for what felt like hours, descending deeper into the planet's crust. Ryan noticed the murals becoming darker as they progressed, showing conflict and destruction. The final images depicted the sundering, humans fleeing in all directions as their worlds collapsed. The corridor ended at a massive chamber. 3 doors stood before them, each marked with a different symbol. The cipher stopped moving and spoke. The trials of kingship await. 3 tests to prove worthiness. Not of strength, but of character. Enter when ready. Ryan's stomach knotted. What kind of tests? The kind that matter, Thomas said softly. The predecessors didn't choose leaders based on power. They chose based on wisdom and compassion. That's what separated them from other empires. Nicole checked her scanner. I'm picking up council signatures in orbit. They found us faster than I expected. We've got maybe an hour before they breach the vault. Then I don't have time to hesitate, Ryan said. He approached the first door. The symbol above it looked like two paths diverging. The moment he touched it, the door dissolved, and Ryan found himself somewhere else entirely. He stood on a space station. Through the windows, he could see a star going supernova, its energy wave expanding toward them. Around him, people were panicking, fighting over the last evacuation pods. There were 50 people and only 20 pods. The station's captain stood frozen, unable to decide what to do. Ryan understood immediately. This was a simulation, but it felt absolutely real. His heart pounded as he processed the scenario. He could choose who lived and who died, selecting based on age or usefulness or random chance. That's what the captain seemed paralyzed by, the impossibility of the choice. But Ryan saw another option. He ran to the engineering station and pulled up the station's systems. The power core was overloading, destined to explode before the supernova hit. But if he redirected that energy into the shields and life support, the station could survive the initial wave. It would be damaged, maybe crippled, but intact. Then ships could come back for everyone. He made the adjustments, his fingers moving with knowledge the cipher fed him. The station shuddered as the wave hit, and people screamed, but the shields held. Through the window, Ryan saw rescue ships already approaching, drawn by the station's distress beacon. The vision faded. Ryan stood back in the chamber, breathing hard. The first door had sealed behind him, and above it, the symbol now glowed green. He passed, Thomas said, wonder in his voice. The first trial tests whether you look for solutions beyond the obvious choices, whether you refuse to accept that sacrifice is necessary when creativity remains. Ryan approached the second door. Its symbol looked like a crown being broken in half. The door opened, and he stepped through into another vision. This time, he stood in a throne room. Courtiers bowed before him, calling him king. The cipher had manifested as a physical crown on his head, heavy with authority. An advisor approached, explaining that they'd discovered ancient weapons in a vault, technology powerful enough to make humanity unstoppable. No other species would dare challenge them. They could reclaim their position as the galaxy's rulers. Ryan felt the temptation. After being treated as a servant his whole life, the idea of having that power was intoxicating. He could make the Velmorians bow. He could force the council to acknowledge what humanity had sacrificed. But he remembered King Andrew's choice. Power hadn't saved humanity. Sacrifice had. Wisdom had. The willingness to break themselves rather than endanger others. Ryan removed the crown and set it on the advisor's hands. Share the technology with everyone. Freely. We don't need to rule. We need to help others avoid the mistakes we made. The vision released him. The second door sealed, glowing green. The trial of power, Thomas said. Whether you'd use authority for domination or service. The third door's symbol showed a mirror with cracks running through it. Ryan's hands trembled as he reached for it. This one felt heavier somehow, more personal. Inside the vision, Ryan stood in the Velmora estate again, but it was different. Lady Velmora knelt before him, tears streaming down her face. Please, she begged. We were wrong. We see that now. But don't punish our children for our mistakes. Show mercy. Behind her stood the Velmorian children who'd mocked Ryan his entire life. They looked terrified. The cipher whispered to him, showing him what he could do. He could make them pay for every insult, every humiliation. He had that right. Justice demanded it. But Ryan thought about the janitor on that space station in the first trial, the people who'd been saved because someone chose creativity over revenge. He thought about King Andrew, who could have fought the enemy directly but chose a path that saved strangers instead. Ryan knelt beside Lady Velmora, meeting her eyes at her level. I remember everything you did, he said quietly. Every harsh word, every reminder that I was lesser. But I also remember that you gave me a home when you didn't have to. You taught me to read, even if it was just so I could follow instructions better. He helped her stand. We can't change the past, but we can choose what comes next. I choose to let go. The vision shattered like glass, and Ryan opened his eyes back in the chamber. All three doors glowed green now, and a fourth door, larger than the others, materialized in the center of the wall. It swung open silently. Beyond lay a cathedral-sized space. Ships sat in perfect rows, sleek vessels that hummed with dormant power. Computer terminals stretched along the walls, their screens lighting up as Ryan entered. And in the center of it all stood a column of pure light. The cipher flew from Ryan's shoulder and merged with the column. The ancient voice spoke, louder and clearer than ever before. Trials completed. Ryan, descendant of Andrew, last of the royal line, you have proven yourself worthy. Not through conquest, but through choice. The fleet awakens. The archives open. Humanity's legacy is yours to protect. Thomas stumbled forward, tears streaming down his face as he touched the nearest terminal. It's all here. Everything we lost. Science, art, history, philosophy. 50,000 years of human achievement. Nicole's scanner beeped urgently. Council breach teams just entered the vault. We've got 5 minutes, maybe less. Ryan looked at the ships, the archives, and the column of light. He felt the weight of his ancestors' choices, their sacrifices. They'd given up everything so the galaxy could survive. Now it was his turn to decide what came next. Ryan ran to the nearest ship, the cipher guiding him toward the largest vessel in the fleet. The name Endurance gleamed on its hull in symbols that his genetic memory could now read perfectly. Nicole and Thomas followed close behind as council soldiers poured into the chamber, their weapons raised. Stop right there, the lead soldier shouted. Step away from the ships by order of the Galactic Council. Ryan kept moving. The Endurance's boarding ramp descended as he approached, recognizing his bloodline. He turned back only when he reached the top. I'm not your enemy. None of us are. You're a threat to galactic stability, the soldier replied. The discovery of predecessor weapons and technology in human hands cannot be permitted. Weapons? Ryan looked at the ships around them. These aren't weapons. They're lifeboats. My ancestors built them to save people, not kill them. More soldiers filled the chamber, at least 50 now. Behind them, Ryan spotted a familiar face. Lady Velmora stood with the council commander, her silver robes pristine despite the dusty environment. She met Ryan's eyes, and he saw fear there, but also something else. Calculation. The human is telling the truth, Thomas called out, standing between Ryan and the soldiers. I've accessed the archives. These ships were evacuation vessels, medical frigates, colony transports. Not a single weapon system among them. That doesn't matter, the council commander said. She was a tall woman named Jessica, her scaled skin reflecting the emergency lighting. The technology alone represents a threat. If humans learned they once ruled the galaxy, it could spark conflicts across every sector. Or it could spark understanding, Ryan said. He felt the cipher feeding him information, showing him how to access the ship's communication array. Let me show you what really happened. Let me show everyone. Before Jessica could respond, Ryan activated the Endurance. The ship systems came online with a sound like a massive heartbeat. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, and Ryan felt himself connected to something vast. The cipher had linked him to every communication network in the galaxy. What are you doing? Jessica demanded. Telling the truth, Ryan said. No more secrets. No more buried history. His face appeared on billions of screens across thousands of worlds. Every species in the council, from the smallest colonies to the most powerful homeworlds, saw Ryan standing on the bridge of an ancient human vessel. My name is Ryan, he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Until a few days ago, I was a servant. I cleaned floors and took orders and believed I was lucky just to be alive. I'm human, and like most of my species, I was taught that we're newcomers to the galaxy. Primitives who barely deserve our place among the stars. He paused, letting that sink in. But it's not true. Humans aren't newcomers. We're survivors. Ryan activated the archives, and the holographic displays shifted. Images from the vault filled screens across the galaxy. The great human cities, the fleets that once protected 1,000 worlds, the art and science and philosophy of a civilization at its peak. 50,000 years ago, humans were the predecessors, Ryan continued. We built the first great empire. We developed most of the technology other species now use. But we also discovered something terrifying. An enemy from beyond known space, something that consumed consciousness itself. It was heading toward the galaxy, drawn by the concentration of sentient minds. The displays showed the breach, that tear in space where something ancient and hungry was pushing through. Ryan felt the audience's fear even across the vast distances. My ancestors had a choice, he said. Fight the enemy directly and risk leading it to every inhabited world, or do something desperate. They chose desperate. They deployed weapons that shattered their own empire, scattered their own people, and erased their own history. They made themselves look like extinction to the enemy, like there was nothing here worth consuming. The displays showed the sundering, the collapse of human civilization, the evacuation ships carrying people in stasis to random corners of the galaxy. Some ships failed. Some were lost forever. But enough survived, and humans forgot who they'd been. They started over as primitives, building new civilizations from scratch. They did this to save you, Ryan said, and his voice cracked slightly. All of you. Every species that evolved after the sundering, every civilization that grew in the shadow of human ruins. You exist because my ancestors chose to die. And nobody remembered. Nobody knew to say thank you. Silence filled the chamber. Even the council soldiers had lowered their weapons, staring at the displays. Jessica's face had gone pale, her expression shifting from hostility to something like horror. My grandfather's journal, she whispered. He wrote about ancient saviors who sealed the darkness beyond the stars. I thought it was mythology. It was memory, Thomas said gently. Distorted by time, but memory nonetheless. Ryan took a deep breath. I could use this technology to demand recognition. I could force the galaxy to acknowledge humanity's sacrifice. I could claim the power my bloodline supposedly grants me. He shook his head. But that's not what my ancestors died for. They didn't sacrifice themselves for glory or gratitude. They did it because it was right. He accessed the cipher's controls and executed a command that made Thomas gasp. What are you doing? I'm unlocking every cipher in the galaxy, Ryan said. Every human descendant who carries this bloodline, no matter how diluted, will be able to access our heritage. The archives, the history, the knowledge. All of it freely available. The displays showed ciphers activating on dozens of worlds. Humans in council space, in independent colonies, even in places as remote as the Velmora estate, suddenly found themselves connected to their past. But I'm not claiming kingship, Ryan continued. I'm not rebuilding an empire. That's not what the galaxy needs. What we need is partnership. Understanding. The chance to build something better together. He looked directly at Jessica. I'm offering the archives to everyone. The medical technology that could cure diseases. The agricultural methods that could end hunger. The clean energy systems that could restore damaged worlds. All of it, freely shared. No conditions, no demands for recognition. Just knowledge given the way my ancestors would have wanted. Jessica stood frozen, her military training warring with the enormity of what Ryan was offering. Finally, she lowered her weapon completely. I need to consult with the full council. Of course, Ryan said. But while you're consulting, people are already accessing the archives. Change is already happening. You can fight it, or you can help guide it towards something positive. One by one, the other soldiers lowered their weapons. Several were human themselves, and Ryan could see them touching their temples as the cipher's activation connected them to genetic memories they'd never known existed. Lady Velmora stepped forward slowly. Ryan, I owe you an apology. More than one. We treated you as lesser because we didn't understand what you carried. You treated me as lesser because you believed I was lesser, Ryan corrected gently. But I forgive you. Not because you're sorry now, but because holding anger won't build the future we need. Thomas was crying again, this time with joy. Do you realize what you've done? You've given humanity back its heritage without starting a war. You've shared the greatest treasure in the galaxy instead of hoarding it. That's what makes us human, Ryan said. Not the technology or the ancient empire. It's the choice to help, even when it costs us everything. Over the next hours, as word spread across the galaxy, Ryan watched the reactions pour in. Some species were angry, feeling deceived by history. Others were grateful, finally understanding debts they didn't know they owed. But most were simply awed by the sacrifice humanity had made. Ships began arriving at Sanctum. Not warships, but vessels carrying diplomats, scholars, and ordinary people who wanted to see the vault for themselves. The council convened an emergency session and voted to grant humanity full recognition of their predecessor heritage, along with honors for the species-wide sacrifice. But Ryan barely noticed the political maneuvering. He was busy helping Thomas organize the archive data, making sure it was accessible to everyone who wanted to learn. Nicole coordinated with remnant cells across the galaxy, helping confused humans process their sudden connection to an ancient past. A week later, Ryan stood on the Endurance's bridge and looked out at Sanctum. The dead world was alive with activity now, transformed into a memorial and learning center. Species from across the galaxy worked side by side, studying human history and sharing their own. You could have been a king, Nicole said beside him. You still could be. Millions of humans would follow you. I don't want followers, Ryan said. I want partners. Equals. That's what my ancestors died for, the chance for everyone to thrive, not just one species. The cipher pulsed softly at his shoulder, and Ryan felt its approval. In his mind, he heard King Andrew's voice one last time, pulled from genetic memory. Well chosen, Ryan. You understood what we couldn't teach, only hope for. Power isn't about ruling. It's about choosing when to let go. Ryan smiled. I learned it from you. All of you. He turned from the viewport and headed toward the archive chambers, where Thomas was giving a lecture to a mixed group of species about human philosophy. There was so much work to do, so many bridges to build. But for the first time in his life, Ryan felt truly free. Not a servant, not a king. Just a human, doing what humans had always done best. Choosing hope over power. Choosing others over themselves. Choosing to build something better, even from ashes. The crown he'd inherited wasn't made of gold or authority. It was made of responsibility, compassion, and the courage to sacrifice for strangers. And Ryan wore it with quiet pride.